to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock, about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool, I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time, once again, for the one, the only, Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Episode 283, he said with a confident grin. Definitely sure that was the number. Can't wait to bring this to you. This is a rock and roll legend, folks, and you come to expect it from Protonic. You expect nothing less. You wanted the best. You got the best. Deniz Tek, let's go. Let's go. Welcome. Sir, how are you doing?
Hey, doing good. How are you?
Fantastic. I don't want to narc out your location, but you're in Hawaii, which yeah. I'm in Milwaukee. Can we just do a fun thing and compare and contrast the I've got a special weather statement for a blizzard, and it's 15 degrees currently. So I'm going to guess it's probably a little warmer where you're at.
Yeah, it's pretty much always the same. High 70s in the day, low 70s at night, sunny, clear.
It's pretty nice. Which island are you at?
We're on the Big Island.
You're on Kona. Okay. Now, the reason why I asked is because it recently came to my attention, the Tekona Coffee, which is fantastic, and I love this so much that like you've got, especially Kona Coffee is my favorite. It has low acidity, which is I get the heartburn, and I think this is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
What we
think it's pretty good too.
Yeah. So lifelong coffee fan. I mean, what led you to doing the coffee thing? Like as far as rock and roll side hustles go, it's a pretty good one. It's an awesome. You get to
yeah. What sort of coffee and rock and roll sort of go together. I mean, you got to have coffee if you're touring. You got to have coffee if you're recording.
It's true.
You got to have coffee if you're rehearsing. It just goes with it. And so it's my wife and I were fortunate enough to be able to take over this farm here that my parents had. So it was kind of we're really lucky to be able to come out here and do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it's I find the whole thing very fascinating. I got to do when me and my wife were in Kona a few years back. We got to go to a roastery and kind of like see the process. And it was just so interesting and so cool to see this thing that, yeah, as a rock and roll person, you take it for granted, right? It's just always there and it's a thing. And to see it from birthing to into the bag, so to speak, was pretty special, honestly.
Yeah, that's right. And, we do the whole thing. I planted the trees, dug the holes, and I pick a lot of it myself, and we do all the processing and we roast it to order. If you order a certain type of roast on the website, we'll roast it that day or the next day, and then it'll be in the mail to you the following day. So we can get it out to people really, really fresh.
I love that. And that's, I was talking recently in the show about the whole idea of there being, whether it's guitar pedals and amps or something else, but the fact of kind of people bringing like the punk rock DIY thing towards various products and things, and I love it. I think it's great. It's a natural extension of when you have to do things yourself, and
oh yeah,
you follow your own the beat of your own drummer, so to speak.
Yeah, and in the music, it's always been that way for us. I mean, it's the band. I was never in a band that was mainstream accepted in the music industry. We were sort of regarded as outlaws.
Yeah.
From the start, and so we always did our own stuff. Even before it was known to do that, we were doing it.
It didn't seem like you fellas really had a choice to a certain degree. Like you were going to do these things super
do
hard.
It yourself or don't do it at all.
Yeah, but it holds up. That's the thing. So I was actually I was rocking out to the it's like the discography, the Essential Radio Bird, the one that came out some years back. And
the one on Sub Pop?
Yeah, it blew my mind, like how it doesn't sound dated, really. I mean, it's rock and roll, right? Rock and roll, if you're into rock and roll is not going to, that's well recorded. It is an awesome kick-ass band playing in a room. It's not going to sound that dated. It's not going to be too tied to, like, auto-tune on the vocals or whatever the fetish of the day is.
That's right. We never really followed any sort of genre-specific formulas.
Yeah,
it's just the music we wanted to do at the time, and so I think that maybe that's why it stood the test of time. Plus, those are pretty good songs.
The songs, the songs hold up, right?
Yeah,
there's something to be said for having a good song, and it's. There's sound bands.
I think it's the most. Yeah, the song is the most important thing. If it doesn't matter that much what the technique is, or what equipment you used, or how great the production values are. If it's a great song, it'll still hold up. And if it's a bad song, it doesn't matter what you do to it. You can't polish it.
Yeah, you can't polish a turd, as they say, right?
Exactly. That's right. I wasn't going to say that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we try to keep it a family show here. We don't.
Yeah, I know.
Well, but it's it strikes me, so while we're talking about of course we're talking about everything here, but while we're talking about the mighty Radio Birdman, I mean, when do you have it in your mind that, like, there's something really special going on, like that, hey, you're playing songs and it's a good time, but what it seems to me like Radio Birdman hit on a very different level. And when something is special, when something's hitting. So it's like you and Rob formed it. It was like mid '74, somewhere around that line, along those lines.
Yeah, exactly, right.
And it's not like you guys were, fully formed from the head of Zeus, so to speak. But is there a moment where you're just like, hey, oh whoa, this is something real?
Well, we both, Rob and I, were on a very sympathetic wavelength together. We were living together in the same place, and roommates, and both of us had been in bands that had failed. Just recently they had failed, and so we wanted to keep playing. So we said, well, just we'll do our own band, and
right.
And this time it's not going to have we're going to do it the way we want to do it, and no compromises, and we'll just have fun with it. But we never thought it would go anywhere.
Right. Well, it wasn't exactly commercial music at the time, and if I remember correctly, you were a negative influence allegedly for TV Jones. Was that the rationale for that?
Yeah, that's what they said. That when they fired me, they said. Actually, it was funny because they came over. Chris Jones and Giles came over to the house where me and Rob were living, and Rob was actually in the room for the conversation, and he still talks about it. And he couldn't believe what these guys were saying, but it was like, yeah, we really need to make money on this, and it needs to be more commercial, and you're getting us thrown out of places, and we can't get gigs, and it's because of this negative vibe that you're projecting.
Yeah.
Me, and I'm the front guy. I was the singer.
Right.
And,
yeah.
I said, and they said, and we found this other guy who's more, he's got a more commercial vibe than you do. This guy, Paul Green, and he has a jumpsuit and a snake.
Oh yeah, it's the most important things in the world. Is a jumpsuit and a snake.
Well, knock yourselves out. But I put on a brave front, but I was actually really upset.
Yeah,
because I'd put a lot of work into that band and a lot of emotional investment in it, and they were kicking me out, and I didn't like being rejected like that, and so I was kind of upset. And Rob was, I'll make you a cup of tea, and we'll talk about it, and he was really good to me about that.
And it's just amazing to me too that, when I listen to Burn My Eye, that first recording, that first version, like it's just there's such a through line to all that stuff that was happening in Detroit, like all the bands, we all know them, but like kind of it had a different vibe, like it hit differently, and it was probably one of the first bands on the, I don't know, do we call it proto-punk? Like it's just rock and roll really, but that kind of brought a different vibe to it, I feel.
Well, I think it had that stuff in it because of my childhood and my teenage years when I was seeing all these great bands and growing up in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
In the late '60s, and so all that, but also it had the British invasion stuff and the Who and the Kinks and the Rolling Stones, which we just totally loved those bands, and that influence was in it too.
Well, and it seemed to me like you were just taking all of the things you loved best about various types of music and putting your own spin on it, which ideally that should be what a band is, but it seemed to meld very nicely that you had sort of the more unhinged elements of, like, say MC5 and Stooges and whatnot. But yeah, you have like the Stones when they're ripping it up the hardest. And that's such a nice, sweet spot for a lot of people, myself inclusive. It's easy for me to say that sitting here in 2022. Was the reaction? I mean, I think I remember hearing something along the lines of, back then you had just as many people on stage as you had in the audience, or something along those lines, and I believe it. Did folks gel with it immediately? Like, I mean, because Burn My Eye is like one of the first songs, if I remember correctly, right? It's first recording, but it's one of the first songs that gets out in the world. And that, to me, that's a mission statement song.
Yeah, well, I guess we recorded that, and we'd already been together playing for a couple of years when we recorded that.
Yeah.
And we had, the thing was, when we first started playing, only our friends came to the shows. And every time we played in a real venue, we were kicked out and told never to come back there again. So, it was the guys in TV Jones were right about that part of it.
Right.
I mean, it was true.
Right.
And so we started putting on our own gigs, and decided to completely do it ourselves. And it gradually grew, because people saw what they thought was something special, and they wanted to tell their friends about it and bring them along next time, and it just sort of grows by word of mouth like that. And it wasn't it wasn't until 76 or late 76 that we actually could get into a recording studio.
Yeah, that's great. And so was that, what was the reality of recording back then versus what your idea of recording was?
Well, we had no idea, how you're supposed to record. So, we just thought we'd just bring all our stuff in and set up like live and play like live. And we were pretty arrogant in those days, and you think you know everything, and studios in the mid 70s were not designed for that.
No.
That everything is carpeted and soundproofed, and it's very, the sound in those studios is very soft, and because they were making records that were supposed to be played on the radio according to the trend of the day, which wasn't what we were doing. And the first 3 or 4 studios that we went to and set up and started to play, they just said, we can't record you. Get out. I've actually got some demos for some of those, were the first 3 or 4 songs we could do.
Yeah.
And, but then at Trafalgar, they were more, I guess they were more open-minded and willing to give it a try. And Charles Fisher, I think he saw something in it that he saw as like the germ of a good idea. And so he agreed to record us, and they would fit us in between paying sessions. So if they had a weekend where they didn't have anything booked, we could go in and do a little bit of work. But we didn't like the way the studio sounded, so we found these sheets of corrugated iron and like roofing material and stuff like that from demolition sites, and we put it in the back of our van and took it over to the studio and dragged it in there and put it up on the walls, and they said, we said, this is going to make your studio sound better. And the engineer was, he was so
I was going to say, how did he feel about that? Yeah.
And, but they let us do it. And I think it sounds pretty good.
We
did record at full stage volume and with our stage amps. In fact, if we had a gig on Friday night, we would just drive after the gig, and we were going to record the next day. We just drive the gear over to the studio and set it up and
just go
record on Saturday and then tear it down and go play on Saturday night somewhere else.
Wow.
And so they got pretty good at setting up the drums just the way they're supposed to be set up. And
that's just what I was thinking. Was the drums? I was like, the drums take the longest to mic up. The drums take the longest to get a good sound on. And if you're tearing them down, it's like you're starting from square one, unless you have a system, I assume.
Yeah, I guess they figured out a system where they could get that done really fast.
Right. That's
so
amazing.
The first album took about a year to record.
Because you're doing it in these drips and drabs. You're doing it like just when you can, right?
Yeah.
And that's really crazy to me, because I had Steve Fisk on last week from Pell Mell and Pigeon Head and whatnot, and he's recorded a million bands. And he talked about when he was recording Screaming Trees, he recorded a lot of that band's records, and like when they recorded their first record, it was they set up like a band. They like faced the control room. They like played it like a show, because they didn't know you did it any other way other than that. Like that's what they thought of to do, and that presents challenges, especially when you're a loud raucous band. So was there like a learning curve towards like getting separation, things along those lines? I mean, this isn't like the Tape Op podcast or anything, but I'm fascinated because I think they're very interesting recordings, is why I'm asking, and I think they turned out really well.
Yeah, well, totally a learning curve, and and gradually you relax a little bit and let other people's ideas come in, which is a very good thing, because they actually know how to record stuff and you don't. But
it turns out maybe you should listen, right?
At Funhouse, they dragged a PA in there,
and that's a pretty good record.
There's no one proper way to record any more than there's one proper way to make an impressionist painting, or it's you can try stuff and sometimes it works.
Since you invoked Funhouse, Radio Birdman is a misheard Stooges lyric. That right? It's like, it's a Radio Burnin'. It's Radio Birdman. Is that correct?
Yeah,
I think I read that somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. The actual lyric, that as it was written, is Radio Buzzin'.
Oh,
that's what Ron told me anyway.
Which sounds even more off base, but who can tell? As much as I love that record.
Yeah, Radio Birdman. That's what we kind of heard, and it was an interesting image, and so we used it.
Yeah, because it's I'm not one to get hung up on band names, but it is kind of an interesting band name. And so when I when you guys came to my attention, it's when I worked at a record store. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting band name. Huh. All right, I'll check that out. Back when it wasn't just like, I'm going to push a button on my phone and listen to a band's entire discography, right? But I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, wow, how have I not heard of this Radio Birdman band? What's their deal? And then like I learned about it, in the days of yore, before you could go to Wikipedia. And it just struck me how kind of otherworldly it sounded. But then someone's like, oh yeah, they have like some connection with the Stooges or something. I was like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. Like it kind of came from the same planet or like the same galaxy, if you will, as that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people in America came to find out about it over a long period of time and late, because we were bumped off the Sire record label before they even distributed the record into record stores. Yeah. That's why the only copies you'll ever find of Radios Appear are cutouts.
Yeah.
It never made it into the stores. Even when we were on tour in the UK, Sire, they lost their distribution deal right in the middle of that. And so, we would go we'd play a show somewhere in the UK. We were doing 6 cities a week for months. And, guys would come up, hey, your band is really good. When are you going to make a record?
Right, yeah.
And it wasn't available. And in those days, you didn't have merch. It was unheard of to bring your own records to a gig and sell them. Nobody had thought of that yet.
Right, which is crazy, because that's about the only way you can make money now. Like
that's right. Now it's everything. It's like half of our income.
Right, but yeah, and also there's the thing of if you see a band, and back then if you see a band and you didn't necessarily know if you'd ever hear them again. If you didn't if you couldn't find it quickly, okay, I just remember that band name when I go to the record store. And if it wasn't in the record store, which is, I guess, is how you end up being the favorite band of all the freaks, nerds, and weirdos, and the and the people that seek out that kind of thing, such as myself. But I think it's a different world when you have your stuff in the record stores, and then it is interesting to think that wasn't even a thing yet. Like that had yet to be sort of. That circuit of here's the merch table did not exist as of yet.
Yeah, that's right. When record stores disappeared, merch tables appeared.
Right.
It's like an evolution sort of thing, I guess. But yeah, they. I don't know what else to say about that. These days. I don't know. Do you have any record stores where you live?
Yes, but it's niche. It's like there's like 2, and they're, what I will say is this is that look, they pay my bills for a while, but Tower Records is long gone.
Yeah.
Like the Warehouse. People are like, what? What's the Warehouse? So what's left are these stores that it's people just. For the love of the music, for the love of the art that are doing it. And so they tend to stock the things that they love, and you can go in and talk to the person who's at the counter, and they'll tell you, like, hey, you really need to hear this. Like, they'll give you the recommendations.
That's right.
So I like that those are still around, albeit struggling, certainly during these times, for sure. But, yeah, not like how it used to be. And I feel like that cultural experience of... Like, you don't get the same experience when you go to Amazon. You know what I mean?
I guess the thing also was radio back in, you're probably too young to know about this, but back in the late 60s, radio was very free. When they opened up the FM band for the first time, there was stuff on the radio that you couldn't hear anywhere else. And it was, the DJs had total freedom. They didn't have to conform to any playlist, and especially in Detroit, WABX. I mean, that you could turn the radio on and hear tracks from Trout Mask Replica.
Right. Imagine hearing that on the radio.
And the Velvet Underground's first album, and
amazing.
And Joe Bird and the Field Hippies. doing You Can't Ever Come Down and things like that, and you'd hear that stuff, and then you'd go down to the record store and say, can you get this in?
Yeah, order it. Yeah, can you order this for me? Yeah. I heard of this killer band. Can you get me the record? Which is amazing.
And the great thing about radio was that you never knew what you were going to hear next. I mean, it wasn't. It led to a much more open experience, because now with streaming, you can. It's like a big jukebox. You can play anything you want, and it'll come on. But if you're only playing stuff you already know, you're not hearing anything new.
Yes. This is my concern, and it comes up, as you might imagine, frequently on this show, because what you have is a closed circuit. So how do you find out about new stuff? Oh, I listen to stuff from my friends. Well, how are they finding out about new stuff? Well, the algorithm will let you see or hear certain things, and then maybe it'll propagate out. And it's amazing that we've given up our autonomy in that way and our freedom in that way.
Yeah. For
convenience.
So these days, I listen, like when I'm out processing coffee and doing things like that. I listen to David Frick's show.
Oh, no.
He's got this show called The Writer's Block.
That's on. Wait, is that a serious show? No way. I'm thinking of. Anyway, please continue.
It's on Sirius XM.
It is serious. Yeah, it is. Okay, thank you. Yeah. That's thank you.
And so he does one show a week, and he'll feature something from the past, but he'll also play new stuff that he's come across that he thinks is cool. So that sort of functions like radio in a way. And then there's a couple other shows. I listen to Little Steven once in a while.
His shows, he pulls some stuff out where it's like, where the hell did you find this? This is awesome.
Yeah, sometimes you hear really cool stuff on there too.
And I think that it's the internet has given people the ability to, become the media, as Jello Biafra has said, and given a platform for folks to be able to be like, hey, you really need to listen to this. But it doesn't always work that way, unfortunately. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I had your compatriot on, James Wiliamson, last year for your awesome record. And, I tried to put a bit of a megaphone on that as much as I can.
Thank you.
It's a ripper, man. Like that record rocks, like flat out. Like it's a good record for these guys that were in much more famous bands or much more well-regarded bands. It's just an awesome record.
Thank you.
And I did what I can. Sorry, I don't.
Well, that was the point. That was the point with that record. I'm a big James Wiliamson fan.
Yeah.
And I tried to pull some stuff out of him that I wanted to hear. As a fan.
For real.
I had a unique opportunity to do that.
I mean, like
I wrote songs for him to play solos to that were specifically designed to get a Wiliamson solo out of.
Yeah, like that type of solo, right? Like,
yeah,
you have like one
well,
of.
We both know what I'm talking about.
We all know exactly.
and I figure, well, this is my chance to make him do it.
Yeah, the hot lava. We want some hot lava out of you, James. Like and it works. Like it rips, and that was real nice to hear because it was sort of. I know he had a whole, and he has an interesting arc as well. And of course, folks listening to the show, if you haven't already, check out that back episode. That's well worth a listen on its own. But he put it down for a while.
Yeah, he did.
Which is nuts. Anytime I hear same Greg Norton from Husker Du, same thing. He put down the bass for 10 years or something, and that's just wow. But you're you. You've done the things that you've done. You're pretty good at this. You maybe should keep doing it. But I get it by the same token, So it was rad to hear him shredding it with you, and I was and that was a two great tastes that taste together candy situation. I felt for myself. But let's go back to Radio Birdman. So Seymour comes out he's gonna sign the Saints, right? Is
Yeah.
that correctly? That's how. And then that's when he saw you guys.
Yeah, somebody dragged him to our gig, and he became a believer.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
But Seymour Stein he's got such a rock and roll heart. He started as with Redbird Records as the kid that was sent out for coffee and take out Chinese and things like that.
Yeah.
And the Gopher, and he went from there, and he never stopped being a huge rock and roll fan. He's got 8,000 albums in his house, and or he did when I went over there, and he just gets enthusiastic, and his label manager, he's the owner, but the label manager was going, Seymour, you don't want to sign these guys. Two of them are doctors,
Right.
and this is not going to work. But Seymour couldn't be moved off that position. He goes, no, they're great. I'm signing them. And I was sitting in his office, and and he already had radios appear, but we had done this live recording of a gig.
Yeah.
And it was a professionally done live recording on 16-track mobile. In fact, we hijacked the ABC's mobile recording truck to do it.
Nice.
And I played him a song off that, a rough mix from that, because we had just done that gig, and then I came over to the States, and I went to New York, and I was hanging around at the Sire offices. And it was a live version of More Fun. And played it to him on a cassette, and he's like up on his desk dancing, and he got on the phone, and he calls somebody in LA and says, you got to listen to this, you got to hear this is the new Danny and the Juniors, and he jammed the phone into the speaker of the cassette machine and plays it to this guy that's on the West Coast.
That's amazing.
I love Seymour Stein.
Seymour Stein's the best.
He's got that rock and roll heart.
he's such just an OG super fan of the things he loves, and it's God, you gotta love it.
And I guess that's part of the reason why the label almost folded, and we got kicked off the label. Along with the Flamin' Groovies and the Rosillos, and 20 other bands got dropped all at the same time. Just because he's more into rock and roll than he's into business,
into making money, yeah. which it's making the money kind of helps with the rock and roll. But yeah, incredible output that dude is involved with, and it's all like all timers of like, oh God, that band's great. Oh, that band's great too. But
yeah,
being great doesn't exactly always bring you financial success in your time.
That's right.
Sorry, spoiler alert, everybody. But I think that that's an interesting time too, because there's so much stuff happening around that time in Australia, and I feel like Birdman kind of was at a time where you guys sort of helped change that in a way. You were part of a culture where this specific kind of just gnarly rock and roll was kind of getting, if not normalized, like, pioneers who got scalped, trails blazed. But by the same token, it must have been a little bit of a lonely place as a band. Like, did you feel like you had common cause with other bands down there, or no? Was it just sort of like...
No, not at all. Not until the Saints turned up. But Australia had a great rock and roll scene in the mid '60s. There were some really cool bands down there, not just the Easy Beats, but also the Masters Apprentices and the Missing Links, and Purple Hearts, and the Loved Ones is another one.
Oh yeah.
The Loved Ones, and Phil Jones and the Unknown Blues. There's a lot of great bands in the mid '60s in Australia. And they all got a fair amount of radio play too, because they had a law that a certain amount of content had to be local.
Right.
But when I got there, I arrived there in '72. All that was gone. I mean, that whole scene was
long
gone.
over.
And it was sort of a spaced out post hippie malaise. It was either electric boogie blues or Hobbit music.
We all know what you're talking about when you say Hobbit music too. We get it.
and so then we TV Jones, the Rats, and then Birdman, and it was a very lonely place because there wasn't anybody else doing that stuff.
Yeah.
We thought that the New York Dolls were doing it, and Suicide, and we loved those bands, and we were really into the early Blue Oyster Cult too.
Yes, who ripped pretty hard, frankly.
They ripped really hard.
Yeah.
They were great, and so really that was kind of it, and then the Saints came along, and we heard their single, and we thought, well, here's some guys that are on the same wavelength as us.
Right.
And they moved to Sydney, and we welcomed them into our scene with open arms. We gave them gigs at our venue. We gave them our rehearsal space, loaned them equipment, promoted them a lot, and but they were much more competitively minded than we were.
Interesting.
Especially the singer just wanted to compete and be an asshole.
Right.
And so we didn't end up being very friendly with them, even though we tried.
Yeah. And
then after us and the Saints, both bands left, went overseas. They kept going for a while. We broke up over in the UK in 1978. And then in the wake of all that, that was when this explosion of bands came in Australia.
Right, immediately afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, it was immediately afterwards, and it was like you'd opened up a floodgate, and there was 100 bands doing that stuff.
And that's got to be bittersweet.
Yeah, it was okay. It's nice to be part of a historical shift, and to have had a part in it. I feel really fortunate about having done that.
When you guys split up in '78, that was going to be like with the Ramones that tour, I think, right? If I remember correctly,
No, it was with Flaming Groovies.
Oh, sorry, Flaming Groovies. My bad. Okay.
We were the next thing that was going to happen. Like that was the first half of '78 up until June, and then we were going to have a couple of weeks off, and then we were going to tour North America with the Ramones for the rest of the year. And if Sire Records had managed to hang together,
yeah,
that would have happened, and I think that would have been fantastic.
That probably would have been okay. Yeah,
I think their audience would have liked us, and vice versa.
Well, it's funny because Flaming Groovies and Ramones, both of kind of coming at it from different areas, but those totally make sense in their own ways, and that's oh god, that's a heartbreaker. That's some sliding door stuff right there. And so, but then around that same time, that's when Living Eyes. You recorded Living Eyes, right? It was, but it wasn't released for a bit. It was like a couple years.
Yeah, that's right. And the reason for that was that we weren't really supposed to record it. We'd already been dumped, but Sire forgot to cross that off off the list of stuff to do, and so we were still booked into the studio, and so we showed up and recorded, and recorded Living Eyes 3 weeks at Rockfield.
Yeah,
and as far as I know, no one ever paid for that session. And I had a safety copy of the tape
Right.
of the mixes, and it sat in my closet for 3 years because we didn't really know who it belonged to, or if we had a right to do anything with it. And
Right.
and certainly Sire didn't want it, and our no other label would have touched it because of the copyright issues and such. So finally, our Australian label that did Radios Appear in the first place, the first Australian one, they decided to put it out and just said, we're only going to release it in Australia and New Zealand. And if they want to come after us, knock yourself out. And so that's when that came out, like 3 years later.
God, that's crazy. And that's
why we put this band together. We couldn't put Birdman back together at that point.
Right.
It was impossible because of the personality conflicts and everything that we had. But I was able to get Ron Ashton and Dennis Thompson from the MC5 to agree to do a tour to promote that Living Eyes album. And they were quite happy to come down and play. And it was having them on board that was the incentive that got Rob back involved and Warwick Gilbert. So we put that band, and we called it The New Race, just for,
Yeah.
We used that name, and 6-week tour of Australia and a live album out of that.
Yeah. Dennis Thompson and Ron Ashton, you could do worse,
Yeah.
you could do a lot worse. I think that's.
Oh man, it was great. The band really rocked, and the recording is good.
Yeah, and there's I know there's a few like bootlegs of that floating around, and things along those lines. But it has a very much there's a through line from the Birdman stuff to that. It feels like.
Oh yeah.
So. Then, so with and I also want to. I'm sorry. It'd be disingenuous not to mention. I mean, you guys are hitting it hard, like as a band before all that happens. Like, and it seems like just kind of always right in the precipice of something really amazing happens. It takes a toll on personal relationships. So. Like, does it take a while to be able to, be in communication with everyone, even like post band? I'm thinking back to, there's the big day out, right? Like that was a thing. Like, it kind of came to my attention around the same time I got into the band, which is funny.
Yeah. Well, we all, after the first breakup in '78, we all kind of stayed in touch.
Yeah.
And maybe not Warwick so much, but the rest of us kind of stayed in touch, and we started working on various projects together. I had Chris Mazowak play on a couple of my solo albums, and he had me play on the last Hitman album, and and I was in touch with Rob, and I had Rob come and do some singing, and so it was all kind of friendly, but nobody really wanted to put the band back together until '96. We got an offer to do that from, Ken West offered to have the band play the big day out.
Yeah.
And he basically said, "Here, I'll give you a suitcase full of cash."
You provided a compelling argument.
And this coincided with the reissue of Living Eyes. We had actually managed to get the 2-inch tapes back from Wales, and were able to remix it. And I think that mixing session, that's the first time we were all together in the same room, in about 13 or 14 years. And then Chris Mazowak was visiting. I was living in Montana. Chris was visiting when the call came in about the big day out, and I said, "Chris, this is Ken West wants to have us on the big day out for a suitcase full of cash. You want to do it? And he goes, yeah, I'll do it. So we called the other guys and they said they'd do it. So we got back together. We didn't know if it was going to still work.
Well, so that's the thing, right? Like, does it take until you get in the room together and somebody strikes the first chord to be like, all right, let's roll the dice?
Yeah, we it's like an old airplane that's abandoned in a field somewhere, and it's and you put oil in it and kick the tires and see if it'll
turn over. Yeah, exactly.
But it did start, and we wrote a couple new songs and did the big day out, and then we did a tour with Wayne Kramer opening.
Yeah.
So Wayne had a really hot trio at that time. It was himself and Brock Avery and Paul Ill, and they just ripped. They were so good. We were coming to the venue early enough every night to see them play first, watch them.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And go there. Okay, boys, there's the mark.
Right. Yeah, you got it.
There's the benchmark right there.
Yeah, don't let down. Like, opener's pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's just, and to me it seemed like enough time had passed musically that, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. This is like post grunge, right? As much as like that's a nonsense term, et cetera, but like, your bands like Mudhoney and Soundgarden and what people that like had your records and love them, and and like the music, and maybe showed some of the influence in some cases. So did it feel like a bit of a reckoning to have like this entire new generation of people that like wasn't around to see it the first time kind of like respond in the way that they did?
Yeah, it was great. It was a real validation for me. And even now, I mean, we did our last shows, our last tours just before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And
was that with the twins that are in the band?
No, this is with Radio Birdman.
Oh, the radio, of course. Yeah, I was thinking of. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah,
Please continue.
The twins are in my solo.
Yeah, your solo band is what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. And but Radio Birdman, the touring and finished up in 2019, and there's grandparents and grandchildren at the shows, and the grandchildren are like 17 and 18 years old, and they're wearing these T-shirts that they found at their grandparents' house.
Right.
and they're at the show, and in the old days we never got very many females coming along to the shows.
Yeah.
It was all guys.
Yeah.
Because it was sort of a, it's like guys want to see an air show or go to drag races.
An air show, totally. Yeah, yeah.
Things like that. And and on the movie Titanic, the thing that brings a tear to guys' eyes is when they show the boiler room of the Titanic.
Yeah.
But
it was so beautiful. Yeah.
But now it's different. Now girls are coming.
Yeah.
There's girls all in the front row, and this is really different, and we think that's great.
It is, and it's nice to see. It's nice to see like a welcoming place for people to kind of have awesome experiences together, where it's not exclusionary, right? Like you can feel safe and rock out, and like it's great. Yeah. As much as like I think people tend to overhype like the how great the danger was of early punk rock or whatever shows. It's like, well, it was just something to be avoided to get to the part you liked, which was like the kick-ass music being played.
Exactly. That's right.
It's my take on it anyway. Since the logo, the Radio Birdman logo, I wanted to I don't talk about this isn't logo talk or anything. I think it's a very good, iconic logo. And I think it's sort of endured a couple epochs of art for how logos are, and has come back around to being like very, very fresh again almost. Was it something where, because it's kind of a strong, like it looks like it would, if I remember right, I think some people were like, oh, is this a cult? What is this kind of thing? Like it wasn't exactly de rigueur for the time.
That's right. Well, we had the logo. I drew the first version of it back in TV Jones times, but we never used it. And then we saw that the Blue Oyster Cult had a logo.
Another good one.
They had that Saturn symbol with a and they had it on flags, and it looked so great. Their stage looked great with those flags. So we said, we can do that. I have a logo. We can use it. So that's why we used it.
Well, and again, since you guys were coming at it from a place of just being, so fierce at what you are, that to have like, a flag to a literal flag to rally around to a certain degree, that's awesome. That's
yeah, and you could have patches with the logo and buttons and things like that, and people could wear that, and they, and it doesn't say anything. It's just the logo.
Yeah.
And
but if
go, oh man, you're into them too. Yeah, me too.
Exactly.
It's like being in a club.
Exactly. You're instantly you're creating affinity with people that are fellow fans. Like they know that, you're awesome. I know what that is, which is great. Because it isn't like the Radio Birdman stuff is all like daunting and crazy. I mean, I'm thinking about like the Hawaii 5-0 homage too. Like that's just
right.
Like that's just good, clean American fun. Well, Australian fun, whatever.
Totally.
And I think that when you guys first came to my attention, it was like, oh man, there's this ripping band, and they're super dangerous. You never heard of them. They're amazing. And I was like, well, I like the birthday party, so it better be pretty good. And then I was like, oh, it's pretty good. But I remember when I first heard that, I was like, oh, they're just having fun being a rock and roll band too. Like
that's exactly right. A lot of people didn't get that.
Yeah.
The fun aspect. A lot of our stuff is fun and making fun of itself. Some of it is, and and a lot of the lyrics are meant to be humorous.
Right.
And some people take that stuff too seriously.
I mean, I guess it's nice that people want to listen.
Rock and roll is supposed to be fun, right?
I mean, ideally, that would be nice. That's how I feel like it should be. Call me crazy. But then that also reminds me. So we're talking about Living Eyes and how that it took a while for that to kind of come out. But you sort of expanded on things a little bit. You had some stuff on there that was. I mean, like Do the Moving Change. That's like a pretty damn good pop song, frankly. You know, it's not like you all were just what is it? Shredded speakers.
Well, we had Do the Pop on the first album, and so we had to have another dance tune.
Right, and that's it's interesting what does and doesn't get over as far as feeling like out of sorts necessarily. But I mean, it works. It works nicely with everything, and it hits it in a way that, like I think back to, like those first couple Damned records. Like I like Machine Gun Etiquette quite a bit.
Yeah,
and that's kind of a crazy record if you stop and think about it. Smash It Up has it starts with a piano ballad. We're like, what is going on exactly? But it can coexist. It can all coexist, people. It can all coexist, and I think that. I'm not sure if the band really got credit for that back then, but I think it comes across better now when people are not so ensconced in their genres necessarily. So, I mean, did you find that was the case? Like when you brought Birdman back, that like people were kind of looking at it as its whole totality, or do you think people just wanted to hear the songs and maybe I'm overanalyzing this completely?
There's always going to be a contingent of people that just want to hear New Race and Aloha Steven piano, and no matter what you do, even in your solo band, they want to hear that, and that's all they want. And if it doesn't sound like that, they don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of our listeners see beyond that. I mean, whenever we play Man with Golden Helmet, we always get a great response from that.
Yeah.
and there's nothing punk about that song at all.
Right, exactly. No, but it works.
You know, we have a keyboard player that when he joined the band knew nothing about rock and roll.
I love
this
that.
guy was like, this guy is like the least rocking person in the world. We had to educate him about a few things, but he had this great classical background. You know, he was a conservatory trained classical pianist.
Yeah.
You know, like Ray Manzarek and so you get a guy like that in the band. That's a real secret weapon.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of that has that there's like kind of a similar through line for is like the Stranglers. You know?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And same thing where it's like that guy's just going like the whole time. Like, wow, like that guy's just going for it.
That's one of the things that made the Stranglers really different and really cool was that was their keyboardist.
Yeah, and it's I think those records have held up well. Also, you know, I mean, why not? Yeah. So talk to me about the time. So we talked about the Birdman reunion, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in between, right? Like you're in Montana, one of my favorite states, by the way. I love Montana, and we also blasted right past the whole medical training thing, right? That's a thing that's not every rock and roll band has that background. But you guys are very. I feel to me the songs themselves and as a band, you guys were very informed by being not just dirtbags, for lack of a better term, like having like coming at it from an informed place. And then I think it's so interesting about that because the only other person I can think of, I mean, I guess there's Guy Madison, right? But there's not a lot of folks that have like the rock and roll to healthcare. I guess I don't know what would you call it? What led you to do that? Like, what led you to do that? How did you end up, like, you know, it was the military stuff for a bit, right? If I remember correctly, like it's.
Yeah, I was in the Navy for a while. Yeah, but you know, I always wanted to have a job that would be something that I could take from country to country, and always be able to work if I wanted to work. And work that would be of benefit to whatever community I was in. It would be giving to that community, and that's why I chose medicine. I mean, I came from a family of engineers. There were no doctors in my family.
Interesting.
And you know, and I respect what my dad did as a professor of engineering, but you know, but I didn't want to do that, and so. Without really knowing what it was going to be like, you know, just having more of an idealistic viewpoint of it, I went into medicine, and it's been endlessly interesting the whole time. It's never disappointed me as far as, you know, there's always a new thing to learn there. And so when I was in Montana, I was working in the emergency room. I was actually the director of the ER there at the trauma center in Billings.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, Montana, to a certain degree, I feel, maybe it is not the case when you actually live there instead of just visiting and touring as much as you can to see it. It has kind of something in common, some stuff in common with Australia, and the fact that the remoteness of it kind of forces people to have build their own culture to a certain degree.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, and the other thing about having a job is that you don't have to compromise the music. You can do whatever music you want. Right. You're not depending for, you know, to pay the rent on conforming to somebody's idea of a marketing plan.
Precisely. Yeah, and you don't have to worry about, hey, is this new single going to sell? Because it better sell. If it doesn't, we're in trouble.
Yeah. You don't have to care about that stuff.
Right. Exactly. And then that's sort of. That's the model for a lot. I'm hearing clicking. Is that me? What's happening? Okay. I feel like there's no harm, no foul for folks that don't go that route, but I think you're able to keep the music and the art pure that way, and I think that's there's something to be said for that, for sure. Do you think that? Is the Top Gun thing true?
You know, I don't really know. It's it could be coincidental. There, I was in a, long story short, I was in a squadron. I had a call sign ICEMAN. It was on my helmet and it was on my name tag on my flight suit. And in the squadron, everybody refers to everybody else by their call sign. You don't even know usually what the other guy's real name is.
Yeah, it's a nom de rock, but like by 20.
And so the film team came out and spent 2 weeks at our squadron doing research for that movie. And they walked around with clipboards and tape recorders and talking to guys and taking photographs and learning about how the squadron works. And then they go away. And then a year later, the movie comes out and there's an Iceman in the movie. But I think it's coincidental. It was probably already in the script.
That'd be funny. I mean, let's put it this way. That's some, pop-up video factoids that I always bring up when that movie comes on the cable. So I hope it's true. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So while you're living in Montana,
it's just too bad that the Iceman in the movie was an asshole.
Yeah, he's kind of a dick.
And that movie really ruined the call sign for me. I hated telling people what my call sign was after that movie.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that aspect of it. That's terrible. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. That's terrible.
You don't get to choose your call sign in the Navy. They give it to you, and you're stuck with it for your whole career.
Yeah.
And unless something really extraordinary happens, and then there's an emergency meeting of the call sign committee, and they might change it, which I've seen happen a couple of times. But it takes an amazing event to change a call sign.
Right. It's not going to be an everyday occurrence. Exactly. So I think that there's so you're in this period where you're doing that, and do you like the work? Do you think that, is it as rewarding as you hope it to be?
Yeah.
It's a lot. It seems like it's a big change. Like, is that something where you just are committed to, like, hey, I'm going to keep this sustainable. I'm going to keep, making my music and pushing things forward. Do you feel like you're going to put things on the shelf for a while? Like, where are you at when you're in that period of time when you're in Montana?
Well, it's one of the great things about being an emergency medicine doctor is that you don't have an office.
Right.
It's all shift work.
Yeah.
And you can schedule that shift work when you want. And if you need to go on tour for 2 months, you can just tell them, I'm going to be gone for 2 months and don't schedule me for any shifts. And this is when I'm coming back. And, if you need to make a record, you can take 3 weeks off and make a record. And so that lack of having an office that you're tied to, and at the end of your shift, you walk away from that emergency department, you don't have any responsibilities to anybody. That makes it possible.
That seems ideal in a way. Like that seems like it would be an ideal situation to a certain degree, right?
Yeah,
I like you get freedom
anyway. It's a great specialty anyway because it's so interesting. You never know what's going to come through the door next, and it's a great window to the world too. The stuff you see in there, and the people that you run into. You could write 50 novels based on
you could have whole
those
series of books. Yeah, absolutely.
So it is a great specialty, but also perfect if you're a working musician as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like being like, you don't think of, when people think of rock and roll bands, like trained ER doctor is not maybe the first thing that comes to mind, but it's great. Also potentially useful as well. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Yeah. So you're so when you get the Deniz Tek group, so you put that together like 91, somewhere. It's like right around the gold rush, as I call it, right? Which you know what I'm talking about when I say that, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
they let the freaks, nerds, and weirdos in for a half minute, and then they quickly auto-corrected. What are you? So you go back to Australia, and this is Chris that kind of encouraged you to do this, if I remember correctly, right? He's like, "Hey, come back."
You mean when I got out of the Navy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's when I went to Montana, but I ran into Chris, and he invited me to come in and play some guitar on the Hitmen recording session, which was down in Houston at that time. They were recording at Sugar Hill Studios, and so I went down, and not expecting to do much, but he put a guitar in my hand and said, play some guitar parts, and I did. And I'd been playing all the time when I was in the Navy. I didn't stop playing guitar. Actually had a group called Dust in the Rotorheads with some helicopter pilots.
That's fantastic.
Played in the Philippines.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that got me interested in it again. And I thought, well, if Chris can make a record down here, I can make a record down here.
Yeah.
So I said, Chris, if I made if I wrote some songs and wanted to do a solo record, would you help me out with it? And he said, yeah, sure. So Chris is fantastic in the studio. He's really good at arranging, and he's a multi-instrumentalist too. He can play keyboards great, and he understands production. So yeah, he said, okay, well, we'll be back in 6 months and do my record.
Right.
And that kind of started the solo career. And I got Scotty Ashton to play drums on that.
I was going to say, you got some good people in there. Yeah. Yeah. And RIP. Yeah. And that's, to me, that sounds like, it's not even losing a step. It seems like a natural through line for those.
Yeah.
Records. But then also kind of approaching the studio a little differently. Now, during the time that you're not like actively playing, do you like downsize the amps? Because I feel like everyone's got like the small amp revolution is like so easy now. Like they have like small amps that actually sound good. But if you're in a situation where you're mobile, you're probably not bringing like a full head and cabinet with, right? So how do did you have a small amp with you when you're doing that? And the only reason I'm asking is because sometimes people get really into the logistics of when I have folks on, especially from like people that are more known, of like how you stay with it. How do you stay creative?
Well, I play a lot of acoustic guitar around the house. I write on an acoustic guitar mostly, and and I don't need an amplifier for that. And and I got small amps here too, for making demos. I have a little home studio. I can make demos. But if I'm going to be, if I'm out with Birdman or with the Twins, I need my bigger amplifier.
You got to push the air. Yeah. You got to push the
air. And what I do there is I keep a couple of amps in Australia and on the West Coast of the US and on the East Coast and in Europe.
So you just get, what you're going to be playing on whenever you go to.
Yeah. I know I'm going to have my own amp.
Yeah.
I have my high watt in Europe. I know I'm going to fall in on that, and it's going to work, and it's going to sound great. Hired gear is notoriously unreliable and bad.
Yeah.
So, and you're right. You can't logistically travel with that stuff anymore. In the old days you could, but not now. And so the only solution is to stage the gear in these different countries.
Yeah. At least have it on the continent that you're going to be on.
Right.
How did you come to high watt as your amp of choice? Was it any?
Well, it's not my only amp of choice. I've got my main amp in Australia is a Marshall, 1970s Marshall that I had back in Birdman in the old days.
Nice.
It's the one I had in 1978 that I bought in London over there, and I still have that amp. And the high watt, I was in the UK and on tour. went to the music store. They had them on special. That's it.
The rest is history.
I said, if it's good enough for Pete Townsend, it's probably good enough for me.
I was gonna say, yeah. He's okay. So you got the Deniz Tek group. You got the a lot happening in the 90s with music. Birdman gets back together again. There's kind of like this whole new generation that gets to experience Birdman. You have the Soul Movers, right? That's
yeah, briefly, yeah.
And you have there's this time period where there's like the Stooges come back, and it was like you were like a guest for that at some point. Is that knowing that there have been this cross pollination in rock and roll for years, and as a dude who actually saw them in their prime, right? Like, what was your first thought when you saw Stooges get back together again? Like, what was your first thought there?
Well, I've been sort of pushing for this for years, because I was a good friend with Ron, and we always talked about it. And, and he's like, nah, he doesn't want to do that. And, that's not going to happen. But the way it happened was actually through the efforts of guys like Jay Mascis and Don Fleming and the guys that were in that movie. I forget what that movie was called now. Velvet Goldmine. Yeah. And so Ron and Scotty started playing as the Stooges Project. And I think they played a couple festivals and got a lot of attention, and Iggy approached them and said we should get back together.
Yeah.
And I thought this is really great because these guys need to get paid.
Right. If anybody deserved it, right? Yeah.
If anybody deserved to get paid, it's these guys.
Yeah.
And now they did get paid.
Yeah, and that's it was so cool to see. And actually, so when I saw I've told this story on the air tons of times, so I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. I saw Jay Mascis in the Fog, so Watt playing bass for Jay Mascis, and they brought Ron Asheton on tour with them. And I live in Milwaukee now, but I'm from Oakland, California, and in San Francisco they played the songs the Jay Mascis songs, and then they bring Ron out and they do like 5 Stooges songs, and my jaw just hits the floor because this is before the internet, so like you could still be surprised by something. Well, the internet was around, not the internet as we know it now. And my friend who I brought with, the sweet guy, loves music, was like, "Who's that guy?" And I'm like, one of my favorite guitar players of all time. Like, you're witnessing history. This is amazing. And then Steve McKay comes out and starts blowing sax on it too, and I'm like just sitting there like, wow. My friend's like, these older guys are pretty good. You could tell something special was spinning up at that time, and I think it happened shortly thereafter. It was nice to see them be able to kind of get their due.
Yeah,
like,
it was really great. It was really great that they got that. The MC5 got back together in 2004, and I did the Australia, New Zealand, Japan part of it, but they had like Marshall Tucker for North America. That's right. And these different guitar players, and they had different singers. They had like Mark Arm did some of it,
mm-hmm.
and they had Evan Dando did some of it, and the choices. Yeah. I think Mark was great, but they just blew it. They should have got Scott Morgan.
I was gonna say there's a couple other folks that maybe would have been pretty killer on that.
Yeah. And Scott Morgan, and just get one guitar player that knows how to play and knows the vibe and has the energy level to do it, and put the band back together and do it as a band.
as a real deal thing. Yeah.
And they could have had the same success maybe that the Stooges had, or close to it, but it didn't work out. I was just talking to Thompson on the phone a couple of days ago about that.
Yeah, I mean,
but hey, I got to tell you, my phone is giving me a warning about running out of gas.
Okay. Well,
so it could cut out at any time.
Fair enough. Well, that's fine, because you've been very generous with your time, and this is awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing it. As you can tell, I'm a big fan, as are a lot of people who enjoy the show. So it's great to have you. So there's a couple things I want to say. So first of all, let's talk about if people want to get TekonaCoffee.com, right? And you can get the records there too. You can get that kick-ass record you did with James last year. It was last year, right? Yeah.
Well,
right?
you can get you can buy merch and records and stuff on DenizTek.com.
Yeah. Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, and then exactly.
And TekonaCoffee.com is just for the coffee. But there might be a link that goes over. I'm not sure.
But it's go and get that. Look, there's people that listen to this show who can afford it. Let's put it that way. But I think that again, I think that's awesome. I think that's amazing that you're doing that, and I love that. Like I said, that record that you did with James is like too many people slept on it. And I hope some people kind of pick that up, because I think that's a kick-ass one. What's going on with you now? Like other than
new album just finished.
Great.
With Keith String from the Flesh Tones on drums.
Oh, cool. All right.
And it's just been mixed. It's going to be mastered on the 18th, and then we'll get it out as soon as we can after that.
I love it. Will you come back when it's done?
Yeah.
Don't not to put you on the spot or nothing, but what are you gonna do? Say no? Yeah. Hey, screw you, kid.
No, it's been good talking to you. You guys, it's been fun.
So last thing, this is the only canned question, Deniz, that I ever ask folks, and you can kind of choose to interpret it however you like. But why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do?
Yes, sir.
Because it's the only thing I know how to do.
Perfect.
I mean, it's just what you do. Got to do something.
Deniz, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Conan.
Take care, brother.
Good talking to you.
All right. There he goes. Fucking Deniz Tek was on this show. Did you believe that shit? Fantastic. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was great. Here, let's there's some tunes, huh?
But at an APB, now it's time to tell you why.
Aloha, Steve and Dano.
Kept breath rolling upside my head. 88 spitting out burning lead. Had to get myself out of town. Don't want to see skulls flying around. Well, burn my eye. Yeah, burn my mind. I couldn't believe it. I ain't lying, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Come on. Punch your shit, calm and shake a scoop. Yeah, Steve, baby, take a ride with you. June, look ahead, is that it sure sounds fine. I'm burning rubber and I'm making time. Well, burn my eye. Yeah, burn my mind. I couldn't believe it. I'm not lying, yeah. No, no, no. Running hard in the northwest. Fish against tank in Budapest. Pyramid eye cruising US 1. Flathead slug around sinking sun. Well, burn my heart. Burn my eye. I couldn't believe it. I ain't lying, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Burn My Eye, 78. That's a little band called Radio Birdman. Maybe you heard of them. If you haven't, you certainly have now. What a cool guy, man. Deniz Tek. Okay, so yeah, I'll put it in the show notes and everything. But
Can you hear me now?
DenizTek.com. You can get that kick-ass record that I was talking about, that him and James, 2-1. And Cleopatra, and you get the coffee. You get the Tekona coffee. Get it? Because it's Kona coffee. I'm actually going to pick some up this week. I'm out of coffee, so this is very serendipitous. I need to have more people on that procure drinks I like. Hey, good times. Thanks everyone for listening. This has been another episode of Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal, episode 283. The name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you very much for listening to it.
As we come to the close of our broadcast day,
This show airs Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific on Radio Nope, RadioNope.com. You can find all the archives for free. ProtonicReversal.com. Always free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding.
This is America, and all the ships at sea.
No ads, no sponsors, no kidding.
Anyone within the sound of my voice.
But if you like the show and you want to support it and or hear episodes sooner, Patreon.com/Protonic Reversal.
I've got
$1 a month will get you there.
50,000 watts of power.
Thanks everyone for liking and subscribing to the show.
I want to ionize the air.
It all helps people find it, and for folks sharing the episodes around, that's great. Thank you for doing that, because that's what we got to do these days, folks.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
More great stuff coming up, as always.
Can you hear me now?
Stay safe out there.
Route 128, you're dark and lonely.
And take it easy.
Got my radio on. Can you hear me now? 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 See you on the radio. If you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. There is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?